Hello, Eric Larson. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm just waking up here in Texas.
So you're in Texas and I'm in Italy. There's a half a day between us. I've already lived. I'm half a day in the future from you.
You're way ahead of me, Sarah.
Yeah, it's like, well, it's 2:00 nearly in the afternoon here. So thank you for getting up bright and early to speak to me.
Yeah, you bet. It's my aspiration to get up very early all the time. So this is me doing that.
Doing your thing, absolutely. So I would be really interested to know, how did you find coaching in the first place?
Alfred Depew.
Okay.
Yeah. Alfred Depew. So the year is 2000. I'm in Maine for a completely different thing. I've just graduated from college and I'm there at a school called the Salt Institute for Documentary Studies. And I'm there as a writer to just spend a semester doing kind of field research and documenting this group of clowns. I won't go into details. And Alfred was my writing teacher. And he, in the kind of the course of that semester, mentioned that he's a writer and he's a coach. And I'd never heard that term at all. So then he kind of talked about what it was, and he focused on like creative people and like political like activists. That was kind of his niche.
Yeah.
And I, for whatever reason, it like just rung in my ear, and I really was interested in kind of what that was. And so it was typical of me. I kind of found everything I could about what that thing was, and it wasn't very much. So I read coactive coaching and I don't know, whatever else I could find. And even the internet wasn't internet 2.0 yet. So it was just sort of a slog through things. And I did that for a long time as I kind of explored writing and journalism and kind of the creative sort of path through life, and just kept coming back around to it. And then there's a few things that kind of pieced together. So there was that piece, and then I also taught English abroad, and that was a big important step because it got me sort of in front of people in a more sort of coachy, educational, sort of helping kind of role. And I really, really fell in love with that, like structuring lessons and figuring out what was going to work with people and all of that. And so I did that for a year, and then I ended up going back to the States and teaching like at a university, like liberal arts curriculum, so film and theater and art history and that kind of stuff. And so kept doing the teaching, but I ran into a problem, which was that these were sort of non-traditional college students, people who wouldn't otherwise have had a chance. So it's kind of a career college. And I noticed that a lot of the people had difficulty succeeding in school. And it wasn't because they weren't intelligent and didn't have what it took, but it's because they had really complex lives and complex backgrounds and all sorts of stuff. And I realized I was way out of my element. There was nothing that I knew how to do to actually be able to help them where they needed their help. So that kind of stayed in there, and I explored the psychology path for a while, but I was like, I feel like I can be helpful sooner than 6 years from now. And coaching. And so I sort of, I kind of messed around with the possibility of a kind of psychology path, but then ultimately found a company that used coaching to help non-traditional college students succeed. And so that was sort of boot camp coaching for me. So I wasn't trained, I didn't have a credential yet, but I did their sort of training program. And then for like 3.5 years, I like coached like 10 people a day. It's just like coaching. And that really took. I mean, I'm a practitioner at heart, and I just want to coach as much as possible. So that was really helpful. It was a great organization, really supportive about your development and everything like that. And then towards the end of that, my tenure at that company, I sought out my professional credential, and there's everything that's happened since. So that's a long answer to your short question.
Yeah, it's a great answer. That's a great answer. I realize as we're talking, we have a lot in common, don't we? I also taught English as a second language, as a foreign language, and I was principal of an English language college, and I also have a performing arts background, and I also ran a drama school for a long time.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
And also did a lot of teaching outside of my own country there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plenty things in common.
Indeed.
So there you are in what by now must be 2004, 2005?
A bit later. So I started coaching for that company in 2006. Yeah, because there's like I got an MFA in there somewhere, and there was other stuff I was trying to do, and then teaching and all of this too. So there's sort of the like dark period, you know, that was I was just discovering in my mid-20s, and then emerged from that relatively unscathed. In 2006, I was in my then now ex-wife moved there to go to Berkeley to go to journalism school. So we moved there, and then I found that job in San Francisco and did that for 3 or 4 years. So that was like 2006 to 2010-ish.
There and thereabouts.
Yeah.
So now we have the young Eric Larson, or the younger Eric Larson, in 2010, been coaching loads of people, 10 a day for term time. So lots and lots and lots of coaching hours under your belt there.
Yep.
What did you do next?
Failed.
Right, those are the best.
Because I didn't have the coaching revolution. How could I possibly know? I did all the things. I mean, that's why I'm Stella. You know, I'm like an ideal client because I effed it up, you know, multiple times, as you'll learn. So that the first time, I don't do well in organizations. That's and I learned that from being in this organization, which I loved, and I loved the work and everything else. But ultimately, I was just like, there's something about this doesn't work for me. And so I sort of begged my now ex-wife, there's a connection here, to not have to work there anymore. And so I sort of flew the coop, and I decided I was going to pursue coaching. And I spent so many hours trying to come up with my business name. But do you know what? That didn't get clients. No. It was not about the name. And then I built a little stupid website. And do you know what? That didn't get me clients. And I as I look back on it, and in light of kind of what I've learned since, I mean, it's almost absurd the degree to which I thought not doing anything, like not talking to clients, like that would actually somehow lead to the thing that I wanted. So, but I did that quite earnestly, you know, for more than a year, trying to kind of make that happen. And it didn't actually work. So I found myself like going, I mean, now we're sort of into divorce territory and all this mess. So there was a lot of different things going on, but I sort of had to return to the workforce. And thankfully I could go, there was now a education company or school that was that had contracted with the previous company I'd worked for to learn, kind of to poach their ideas about coaching, and then kind of form an in-house coaching program. So I was hired to sort of, as a coach, to kind of come in and share some of what I knew and help shape that sort of fledgling program. So I was back in somewhat of a similar position, doing the same thing. So I did that. While also, and on the side here, like I have a client here and there, and you know, there's people that trickle in and all of that, but I'm still like, who am I? What do I charge? Who do I serve? I don't know any of that. And I kind of go through that period for another couple of years before it dawns on me, oh yeah, I hate organizations. And then I leave again. I go on a 400-mile long walk in Norway to try to sort myself out, and I come back and
you literally went a 400-mile walk.
Yeah, Oslo to Trondheim. It's called the Gudbrandsdalen Trail. It's an old pilgrim's path in Norway. So I say I needed fresh air, so I went for a walk for a month. And yeah, lots of interesting stories that are sort of coaching related to that, and partly about sort of this idea of a path to mastery. I very much think about that sort of experience and what a path just on its own has to teach us, and all of this. So I did that, and I came back home, and I'm kind of stubborn. It takes me a while to learn. So I repeated everything. A little bit more success this time because I had something more like an ideal client, which is a divorced man who doesn't know what the hell to do with himself now that he doesn't provide and protect as his primary sort of thing. So I started holding workshops and kind of meetups for men, and and I got some clients that way too. But mostly I rented an office and spent time staring at my website trying to figure out what was going to get people. But I did a little bit more and published some videos and did a little bit of posting online and messed around a little bit with Facebook. But this was still, even in Facebook terms, I mean, this is still like 2012, 13, something like that. So it's still like, well, a little bit later than that, but it still, it wasn't what I have learned since. Yeah. And so I did that. And then that, I did that for like a year, 18 months or something. And that never really picked up either. So I did another stint at the same company in the same role. Okay. And then, and still, get private clients on the side and all of this. And then something changed in the industry, which is the emergence of these platforms like BetterUp is one of them. And the platforms where you can basically not have to do your own business development. And then they're contracting with companies, and then you go in and coach people. And so that was a huge thing for me. So it allowed me to be able to shift away from sort of straight full-time work, get a lot of practice coaching, but also have enough time and space to be able to spend building my private practice. And I'm kind of at the tail end of that now, where I'm getting clients from a platform, and I'm giving a lot of daily practice, all the time, six-ish clients every day through that. And then I'm phasing out while I get my private practice coming, which is is a huge difference. And I have all the confidence in the world. It's just sort of the time that it takes to do that. So I think that's the sort of the whole narrative.
There's a few things in there. The BetterUp, the first I heard of BetterUp is that Prince Harry is now an advocate.
Yeah.
Very, very funny thread, funny, perhaps the wrong word, curious, better word, thread on one of the coaching groups that I belong to, where they were absolutely enraged that Prince Harry was now going to be coaching. I was like, nobody said he was going to be coaching. Oh, just because he's white and privileged, he's now going to be coaching people. That's not what it says, but it's, I think there is a tendency, and you probably know more about this than I do, or maybe we know the same, but there's a tendency with coaches to stick with the highbrow, with the intellectual side of coaching, and to believe that if they are the best coach that they can possibly be in terms of their technical coaching skills, that their clients will come.
Yeah. And that's absolutely my story. Like, I'm a good coach, like that, and nobody would sort of dispute that. And good sort of technically, and now good in terms of like I'm developing my own style, and I'm kind of I'm nimble, and I can be creative, and all of that. It doesn't matter. In and of itself, it doesn't matter.
No.
Certainly, there's so much more to it. So I feel like partly what I'm doing with my business, like what I've kind of learned through mentoring too, is just I'm taking what value there is in being excellent, and partly leveraging that to be part of the message that I'm communicating to my ideal client, which is a coach. So, and it's been interesting. I've been sitting on this idea of coaching coaches since that first job. I was like, for whatever reason, I always wanted teach the teacher or train the trainer. I don't know what it is. Like that's how I want to do it immediately, even when I have no experience. So that seed was planted a long time ago. I want to coach coaches. And I've gotten experience mentoring coaches in organizations and training coaches and doing all that sort of stuff, but have never sort of come out of the closet, like declared myself like a coach's coach. And I think that's actually okay, because I think you do need for me, it makes sense to have a high degree of experience, some failure, some humility from that failure, and then to just have worked with an awful lot of people. I mean, I have my 10,000 hours at this point, so that's a lot of just experience, just noticing the patterns in people and all this sort of stuff, and to have that kind of nimble. So it feels like I'm just at a point now where I can be doing the thing that I'm doing, and I don't have another career. I didn't come from HR. I didn't come from corporate. I didn't come from a lot of places where people kind of go, I don't want this anymore. I'm going to do coaching because it's, you know, it's service driven and it allows me to be free, and all the reasons that a lot of people go to coaching. I didn't have that. I'm like part of a generation of coaches who like coaching. Like that's what I did. There isn't something else. So I'm glad to be the ripe old age of 43, senior a little bit in my field, and being able to offer something back to people.
To the coaching community. So we've implied it, but we haven't actually specifically said it, that you are indeed a Coaching Revolution mentee.
I am.
And with a little bit of luck, you'll be our first US-based Coaching Revolution mentor, which is where it starts to get really exciting. So I remember talking to you when we first spoke, and you are always charming, but you were the closest to belligerent that I can imagine that you get, because you said, I don't like being told what to do. I don't like conforming. I don't like behaving. I don't like any of these things. And I said, okay, well, we can probably work with that. So from that conversation to where you are now, what happened? Because clearly you did a little bit of conforming and you did a little bit of behaving.
A little bit, but it didn't occur to me that that's what I was doing. So it may look that way, but Paul will tell you something different, which is like, I mean, this has taken a minute, Sarah. Like, this is not easy. Poor Paul. I mean, God bless him. I mean, he's just so patient, giving me all the space. He understands my sort of like, I mean, he really got, like, he had me take like a Myers-Briggs or a version of that. And when he saw like, oh, INFP, he was like, I get it. Okay. And whatever he did in backstage to adjust his idea or expectation, or just how flexible he was going to be, he's given me all the space in the world to do that. And this is my second ICA. I didn't even start with I'm going to coach coaches, right? So we've kind of been through it.
Stop you there for a second.
Yeah.
Why didn't you start with wanting to coach coaches? Because you came up with a software guy, and your, you know, what you were writing was really interesting, and clearly you came up with a software guy. It feels to me like you came up with a software guy because that's who you thought you should have as a client. Whereas clearly, if I cut you in half and looked at the end, it would say, I am a coach's coach, all the way through, like, you know, like.
Yeah. Well, I think there are sort of two reasons. One is, like, I do have a lot of success coaching software engineers, because from these platforms, which are kind of based in Silicon Valley and all that, that's who shows up. And so a lot of it, and a lot of them are sort of mid-20s, male, like there's just a lot of resonance. And it turns out engineers are incredibly creative people. They also have this sort of like very structured side. And that's really familiar to me. And I like working with them. And I feel like a kind of mentor, a little bit of a kind of elder. And that's been really satisfying to me. So I was like, well, that's what's working. That's what I'm learning from the platforms and what's sort of working for me. So that just made sense. And I think the reason that wasn't overridden by what I've eventually come around to, which is the coaching coaches, is that I didn't quite feel ready to come out of the closet, like to declare that I was ready, because nobody's going to give you permission. Well, now we could say, like, okay, if you're an MCC, you have permission. Not really. And a lot of, the coaching industry is like, if you train coaches, you train them at the school where you were trained. There's a little bit of something weird about that to me. It feels like pyramid schemey or something. I just don't like it. And I knocked on the door of the school that I trained at, and for different reasons, some of which maybe I don't know anything about, but partly geography, like it didn't make sense for me to be a trainer with them. And that would be a little bit like working in an organization. I don't know that I would want to like deliver their curriculum, even as much as I loved it. And it was absolutely the right school for me. And I know nothing disparaging to say about it. It just I'm kind of glad that the door wasn't open for me. So I had to, in a very circuitous way, through a lot of experience and reflection, kind of decide for myself, like, I will make my own badge and pin it on my own lapel and step out and say, I can do this, and on my own authority. And that was a little too much for me without Paul's support and without a little bit of time. Because when we came around to kind of going, this isn't really working, like people weren't showing up on LinkedIn, and I was reaching out and people were connecting and all this, and I was posting, and I mean, I really think, and Paul agreed, that we kind of had the right message for people, and that was corroborated by the people I was working with who were software engineers and all of that. And I got a few like little nibbles, but it wasn't really working. And so we had a big conversation about like, well, what do we think is going on? And he asked some question, and we kind of got into the sort of like, well, because I kept sort of having this little thing in my ear, and I was like, let me just say this just because I'm distracted by it. If I had my druthers, I would just coach coaches. And he's like, oh, that's interesting. What about that? And then I went on this like rant, and he's like, I've never seen you so alive, you know? And it's not that I was a drag when I was talking about software engineers. He was just like, their coaches are sort of your people. And I was like, yeah, I know, but I can't. And he was like, let's talk about this. And then he gave me some time to think about it. And I came back and was like, I think you're right. Because that's what I get. I have so many opinions. I'm pissed off about coaching, and I love coaching, and I have so much invested in it for whatever reason. I'm not that inclined to analyze it. I just do. And coaches matter to me. And I think coaching just as a technology, as something that's out there, has so much possibility and so much application. I want to see that thrive. And so I was like, well, I think I actually have something to offer, and something kind of unique to offer, which is what I'm working on now.
So again, it sounds like we have something in common.
Yeah. That sounds an awful lot like what you're up to.
About coaches. Yeah. I think, I've said this to you before, I think that we coaches have earned the privilege of wearing our underwear on the outside. You know, we are superheroes. We can transform people's lives, and we know that because ours were transformed. Yeah. You know, coaching is a superpower, no two ways about it. And so it's interesting actually, because I use an analogy of weighing scales, old-fashioned weighing scales, and on one side you have all of your delivery skills, you know, your coaching credential and all of the stuff that goes on the delivery side of your coaching business. And on the other side, you have all the skills you need to create the opportunities to do that delivery. And so you and I sitting here talking, we are two sides of that scale.
Yeah, that's exactly how I think about it. And I'm really, like I said, like at heart, I'm like a practitioner. So my favorite thing to do in the world, one of the things I've been doing on vacation here at my in-laws in Texas, is I love to hit a ball against a wall. Like, for whatever reason, since I was a kid, there's nothing more satisfying to me than just repeating again and again and again, and like as like practice, like getting better at doing that, or throwing the ball against the wall and catching it like a baseball player. Like that kind of practice, and that sort of deliberate, repetitive kind of practice where I'm doing something. It doesn't look like it. It just looks like a ball hitting a wall, but I'm there, like, you know, figuring out how to do it a little bit better. Like, this is deeply satisfying to me.
So what's coming to me here is The Great Escape.
I don't remember it.
Oh, Steve McQueen in isolation, and he throws a ball against a wall for days and days and days on end.
I don't know if that's a good reference, or like, this guy is crazy, but maybe that says something about my childhood. I don't know. But that image comes to mind a lot, which is like what I feel like I'm doing as a coach, and what I want to offer as a coach too is just an opportunity to like drill and like really get some of the basic skills down. One of my sort of complaints, I think, is that in our training we learn, you know, we'll have a listening module, and, you know, we do these sorts of things, and we sort of like We get just good enough to not be dangerous, to our clients, and then that's kind of it, and then we're sort of cast out on our own, and we're expected to build a business this way and everything else. And I think, well, and it's one thing for most people to like you could go through 5 years and have, I don't know, maybe 100 clients, if that. That's not very much practice. And it's not deliberate practice where you're outside the context of the performance, so to speak, and you're actually repeating, like in theater, like in sport, or like in music or whatever. And that seems to me absurd. Like, just because you got the stamp of approval from your school doesn't mean you're practiced as a listener. Like, it doesn't. And so part of what I'm doing as part of my business is forming something called the Coaching Dojo, which is designed to sort of give people opportunities to like drill and practice the basics in a way that's like creative and fun and connected in community with other people, but where you can do that like you'd go to the gym, or you can do that like you'd go to the yoga studio or the martial arts studio or something like that. And so that's, for whatever reason, again, that's the bouncing the ball against the wall gets me really excited. And then to be able to sort of reflect on your practice, the way you might in supervision or mentoring, even like ICF mentoring, except I don't want to be bound by those walls, actually. I really believe in supervision. I think it's important, like as a function, but I have a more agnostic view of what supervision is. So there's there's ICF supervision, and then there's just supervision, getting other people to be in community with, to reflect on your practice, to like talk about the ethical boundaries and stuff like that, but not someone that is kind of perceived as an authority, which is where I get a little bit uppity in that. So, and I'm still in kind of my own inquiry about this, because I would like to see the professionalization of the organization to a degree. I want it to be legitimate, but I've also had success. It's an unregulated industry. I've had a whole career. Like, okay, if it's never regulated, like, I don't need that to feel confident about myself. I don't need it to build a business. It's true, there are charlatans and there are snake oil salesmen and there are people who get certifications for $12.99 overnight or whatever, and like, nobody in their reasonable mind with the opportunity to reflect is going to like choose that person over somebody with and that's there's just, it's messy, but that's fine. I don't think like a strict professionalization and sort of naming all the rules and all the walls and doors and ceilings and floors is necessarily going to change that. So I don't know. I mean, I don't have final thoughts about any of this, but I hope I'm not being sacrilegious.
No, not at all. But I think the thing about having an accreditation is that it gives you the boundaries that you can then move around and without and within. It's like, once you know how to do something, then you can start breaking it, can't you?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so I'm like, I'm a huge believer in being trained. I mean, that just makes sense. Do I believe that people could be excellent coaches outside of formal training? Absolutely, of course. But like, why not? Well, why not have training, and why not have that be sort of legitimize the basics? I mean, I've seen so many coaches from so many different coach training programs, and like, some of them they're pretty bad, but they just teach the very basics. It's like how to listen and how to like prevent yourself from just blurting out advice to people, right? Like, that's one of the main distinctions that I think needs to be made. And once you've got that, and like what the difference between an open and a closed question is, and some of these like relatively basic distinctions, which aren't necessarily obvious, especially if you've been in this culture and in a different kind of context for a long time, those things are really important, and to practice and to see other people, and that's wonderful. But then like, what are you going to do with that? They gave you the lump of clay, great. Now, what are you going to sort of do with it? And yeah, like you said, I think that the lump of clay gets divided into the sort of business concerns, and then how do you then continue to refine your skills? Because I don't think Paul Snell gives a great analogy, which is, he did Aikido for years and years. And, one day when he had his black belt, his sensei said, "Great, you're just beginning."
Nice.
And I think that's once you have your credential, then you've demonstrated enough commitment, whatever, to be able to enter the path. Sorry, what?
It just means the training wheels are off.
That's it. Yeah.
And now
but they're still right there if you need them. There's it barely. So I just think it's and I approach this. It's a personal, professional, and it's a spiritual path for me. That's how I see it. So it runs really, really deep. That's partly the training that I sought out too. Didn't explicitly sort of say this is a spiritual path, but it's a way of being in the world. Coaching is the primary lens through which I see things. Not that I can help everybody I see. That's not for me what coaching ultimately is. I could go on for hours about the point of view, but it's this open, accepting, flexible, curious stance, that you just sort of take. And then that's my aspiration, is to do that in all aspects of my life. Now, there's not a single day when I've done that perfectly. So I've got a lot to continue to do, which is for me the kind of essence of it is it's an infinite game that never ends. I play in order to play again tomorrow.
We've been talking for 32 minutes.
What?
I know. How is that even possible?
I know.
So, if coaches want to come hang out with you, where will I know where we're going to find you, because I'm already there. So you tell me, where am I already?
Well, you have to go to New York City. There's a dark alley. In Brooklyn, you have to have a card with the secret word. This is how I envision it. I used to say, I want to be the black card coach, where nobody knows I exist unless you know, and then you have to find me through some odd way. That's a fantasy. How you can actually find me is on LinkedIn. No website or anything yet, but I'm talking to Paul in a couple hours to see if that's something I want to do. So far, I haven't needed it. People reach out pretty routinely. So Eric Larson is my name, and this is what I look like. So you can usually find me on LinkedIn.
We can also find you in the Facebook group, the Coaching Dojo.
Yes. Yeah. The Coaching Dojo. And that's a Facebook group that I run and I'm sort of building right now. And that's affiliated now with a podcast I'm doing called Notes from the Coaching Dojo, which I'm very excited about. And it's just kind of my weekly 5-minute or so commentary on imagine I'm sending you dispatches from the path, and sort of saying, here's what I know, here's what I've seen. And it's been getting really good traction and a lot of good feedback. So I'm excited about that too.
Brilliant. Eric Larson, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Sarah. This is great.
You're welcome.
Cool.